policy implementation under the Economic Reform Program has remained exceptionally strong since the start of the program. The economy continues to reflect generally positive trends.
Key indicators for the country as at July 2016 continue to show clear signs that the economy is improving. The Planning Institute of Jamaica estimated gross domestic product GDP growth for the second quarter, April to June 2016, to be 1.1%.
It was a good, strong number. And what we see in this estimate is that all the sectors across the board, except for mining and government services, grew.
This momentum is expected to continue along a trend of increased growth as recorded over the last 4 years.
So if we look back to the January to March quarter, it was 0.8. Remember the April to June is 1.1. So the quarter before, which is January to March, is 0.8. And the quarter before that, which is October to December, is 0.6. So there's a kind of build-up in the rate of growth of the GDP.
The goods producing industry recorded growth of 2.3%, while the services sector grew 0.8% for the first quarter of the fiscal year April to June compared to similar period last year. In the goods producing industry, agriculture recorded the strongest growth, up 7%, manufacturing up 0.7%, and construction up 0.4%. Mining and quarrying declined by 1.3%. Under services, all industries grew with the exception of government services, which is down 0.2%. Electricity and water industry went up 5.5%, and hotel and restaurants up 1.6% over the same period last year.
Manufacturing has been modest and steady, and on the positive side, influenced very strongly by the Petrojam factory, which is a very high value output manufacturing operation. So that tends to skew the performance of manufacturing quite a bit. Construction, modest but positive also.
Economic growth in Jamaica is recovering gradually. The growth in fiscal year 2015-16 has been revised up to 1%, driven by agriculture and manufacturing. Growth is expected to reach 1.7% in the current fiscal year 2016-17 as ongoing investments crystallize and agricultural recovery continues.
Preliminary balance of payments data released from the central bank pointed to the current account showing a surplus of $116.3 million for the quarter January to March 2016. This is an improvement of $136 million relative to the corresponding period in 2015. The outturn for this quarter contributed to a current account deficit of $259.3 million, or 1.9% of GDP for fiscal year 2015-16. The current account measures everything the country buys abroad in goods and services versus everything that it sells, with the balance being the current account deficit or surplus.
And I say this is a remarkable number. Back in 2013, it was 9 point something percent. And for us to get down to 1.9 is tremendous. What that means is that we have enormous savings of foreign exchange. So very good news on the balance of payments side.
The savings were influenced by decreases in oil prices and improvement in tourism performance over the same period last year.
To the extent that the growth agenda is able to move forward, and I would add that we are seeing some green shoots and it all needs to come together. We see agriculture recovering, we see manufacture recovering, we see tourism improving. So there are lots of pockets of growth that are happening. The BPO sector is growing. So I think once this growth gets deeply entrenched, the unemployment rate is going to come down, and that will, lift the whole base up, and that's the goal we have.
The Bank of Jamaica BOJ report for the quarter ending June showed continued expansion of credit to the private sector, up 11.9% in real terms. Increased business lending was reflected in credit to the tourism, electricity, gas, and water, as well as professional and other service sectors. BOJ reduced interest rate on the 30-day certificate of deposit to 5%, the lowest policy rate on record. Looking at selected fiscal and monetary indicators for July 2016, central government had a primary surplus of $36.4 billion, far ahead of the budget of $14.2 billion, and this is due to reduced government spending. Revenue collection of $153.8 billion for the first 4 months of the fiscal year 2016-17, up 7.7%, is above target of $142.9 billion and significantly above the same period last year.
Debt remains on a downward trajectory, and the recent liability management operation has reduced refinancing risks. The government remains strident in its goal to promote equity, efficiency, and uniformity in the tax system. And with the full support from the IMF, will continue efforts aimed at rebalancing from direct taxation towards more broad-based and growth-inducing indirect tax measures.
And as tax collections continue to outperform budget in July, the best performances categories were GCT, up $2.4 billion, PAYE, up $2.4 billion, and company tax, up $1.5 billion. Travel tax and tax on interest were the main underperformers. Annual inflation is continuing at record lows, with 0.9% in June and 0.5% in July, while the net international reserve NIR at the end of August was at $2.52 billion, comfortably in excess of even the IMF target of $1.44 billion for the end of September.
The government continues to be fully committed to the reform agenda and is escalating efforts aimed at boosting growth and job creation, as well as strengthening the social protection framework while maintaining a prudent fiscal posture.